All right, good evening, dear students. It's a pleasure for me to be with you again. Um, well, as you can remind, today we're going to continue with our excursus on the speaking section and in the fourth task, most specifically, right? So what we are going to do today is simply to practice for the fourth task that we have learned about yesterday. And in order to do that, well, as you know, we are going to follow the same mechanism. Please, all of you, grab your piece of paper, grab your pencils, and well, we're going to listen to some lectures that I have prepared for you, and then you're going to be able to respond to me. And of course, I'm going to offer you some commentaries so you can take them into consideration, and thus we can all improve, right? So let's get into that, okay? It's a pleasure to be with you again, by the way. Okay, let's go. For example, I'm going to share my screen with you, and you're going to be able to see here this. Okay, let's open the Gush. So it's our tradition. And also, here's this chronometer. Okay, so you can remind, we are in the fourth task of the speaking section. So let's go to it and let's select speaking task number 4. Okay, let's go. Quiz mode. Wonderful. Okay. Turn to dashboard. Again, speaking for answer in quiz mode. Okay, wonderful. Now, remind, what is going to happen is that you're going to receive, first of all, a passage that is going to be a listening passage. In this case, it is going to be about it's going to have a duration of about 2 minutes, and you're going to listen to a professor talking about an academic topic. Okay, that is what is going to happen. And then, of course, remind, you're going to have 20 seconds in order to prepare a response and 60 seconds to deliver it. Okay, so before we get into it, let's remind the template that I offered you yesterday for you to follow. Okay, I want you to have it very fresh on your mind. Okay, so remind, look at it. This is the template you have to follow. You simply have to begin by saying, in this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of, you summarize super generally what the topic of the lecture is, and then you move on to the specifics, right? First lecture's point, the professor made, and later you obviously offer the illustration as well, super short, super concise, okay? You move on to the second lecture's point and illustration, and you finalize with, if there is a first lecture's point, you say it and also summarize the illustration. Okay, remind, you are not required to give your opinion here. It's simply a matter of stating and summarizing, okay? No more than that. Collect information, take your notes, deliver, okay? Be like a journalist, don't forget. Okay, so now that we have seen this, again, let's go to the practice, okay? So please have your piece of paper ready. Try to apply as well the suggestions that I gave you yesterday for you to take notes efficiently, and let's listen to it, okay? Okay, and let's go.
Now, listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
Let's talk about 2 kinds of biological selection. 2 different ways that traits are selected in a species of animal as it breeds and reproduces. First, there's natural selection. Here, living things develop features that help them survive in a certain kind of climate, escape from a certain kind of predator, that sort of thing. In contrast, we have artificial selection. Artificial selection happens outside of what we'd call nature. It happens when people deliberately breed living things for their own use. Now, it's true that natural selection and artificial selection both give a living thing the traits it needs to reproduce and survive. But these 2 types of biological selection also have very different effects, obviously. Maybe one of the easiest places to see this difference is with wolves and dogs. Let's start with wolves. So, what's a wolf's job? It's to survive in the wild and get enough to eat, right? So certain qualities are naturally selected. Wolves need keen senses so they can detect prey. They need to be fast, strong, and aggressive to catch their prey, and to survive even in the harshest weather. Wolves that are born with these qualities live longer and pass the qualities on to their pups. That's natural selection. But a dog's job, its role in its environment, is a little different. Dogs don't need to survive in the wild. They need human protection. So to survive, a breed of dog needs to have traits that humans want. Take the golden retriever. People bred a dog big enough to be a good hunter, but not so big that it was hard to control. And it had to be obedient, unlike a wolf, right? A golden retriever has to be, well, friendly in order to be well-liked enough that we humans decide to breed it, so we can get similarly friendly puppies, more pets.
Using points and examples from the talk, explain the two types of biological selection.
Wonderful. Okay, so as you can see, that is the lecture. Okay, now what's going to happen? It's simply I'm going to choose one of you randomly, and that student is going to be the first one to respond, and then the other ones are going to follow. Okay, so the first one in this case is going to be Laura. Laura Choque, please. So you're going to be the first one to respond, but as you know, every single one of you is going to respond. Okay, so in this case, the preparation time is just 20 seconds. So I'm going to edit this. And now, please, all of you, dear students, begin to prepare your response now. Okay, so Laura says that she is not going to be able to respond in this first lecture, so let's go to the other student I can see. Carlos, please, you're going to be the first one, okay? So,
okay,
please begin to deliver your response now.
In this lecture, we're going to present the fascinating topic of natural selection and artificial selection. The professor is stating that there exists two types of selections, the artificial selection and natural selection. An example of artificial selection will be the wolves that they have to survive in the wild and have to be very aggressive to follow the prey. And also, on the other hand, we have the natural selection. An example of this could be the dogs that didn't really need to be very aggressive. And in other, they can be very friendly to be fed by the human and also very obedient. So these are the two differences between the artificial selection and natural selection.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Carlos. Okay, so now please, Jadi, you're going to be the next one. So please have your microphone ready and begin to deliver your response now.
In this lecture, we have been presented the fascinating topic about natural selection and artificial selection. In the natural selection, there are different features that the predators need in order to survive. For example, wolves, in order to survive, they need to eat, they need to be fast, strong, and in order to support extreme weather, in order to live longer. In the artificial selector, there are different effects. For example, the dogs, they don't need to survive in extreme weather. They need the human protection. So they need to be big enough, but they don't need to hunt their food. They need to be friendly in order to live longer.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jadi. Okay, so now please, Carolina, you're going to be the next one. Have your microphone ready, and now please begin to deliver your response. Oh, Carol, yes?
There was a lot of fools here where I am right now. I couldn't hear very well.
Oh, okay, Carol, it's fine, don't worry. So you're going to participate in the next one, okay? Okay?
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Carolina. Okay, so let's move on then to Miguel Angel, please, Miguel. Have your microphone ready and please begin to deliver your response now.
Okay, in this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of natural and artificial selection. Well, the professor explains about the difference between these two ones, giving an example with wolves and dogs. He explains about wolves when saying that they need to survive in the wild. They need to catch their prey. So in order to do that, they need to be fast, strong, and doing that, they live longer and they pass the genes to the other generations. But dogs don't need that. They need to be helped by the humans. So that gives us the possibility to change how they are. So we modify them in order to be funny, in order to be cute, and to be obedient. And there, it's clearly explained the difference between natural selection with wolves and artificial selection with dogs.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Miguel. Okay, Albert, I think that you just got into, right? So you're now also going to be able to respond.
Yes, teacher, I didn't hear the audio.
Okay, don't worry, Albert. You're going to also participate in the next round. Okay, now, Carol, there was another, Laura, you're able to respond now, or you're not able to respond to this lecture whatsoever? Laura? No? Okay. Oh, you're fine. Laura, yes, you can respond. Okay. Okay, I think she cannot. Okay, it's fine. Don't worry, Laura, for the next round too. Okay. So for those of you who responded, okay, have some commentaries. For Carlos, no objections. Very good response. It was very, very good. For Jadi, the same, very, very good response too. In your case, just some little words, maybe the pronunciation I could help you with. Artificial, right? Artificial, like when you're talking about artificial evolutionary process, artificial, right? That's the pronunciation. And for example, I listened to you when you were talking about wolves, how when you wanted to express that they need to tolerate, for example, the cold, and they need to tolerate the jungle and that very wild environment, you use support. They had to support that specific environment, you said. So I think that you mean tolerate, right? Like tolerating, but support in English, remind that support, the verb support is apoyar in English. So you should not try to use that specific verb there, but nevertheless, wonderful, very good response, beautiful. Miguel, exactly the same. Your responses have exponentially improved, actually, very, very good. The only thing would be the word helped. Remind that when you're talking about helped and you're trying to use that verb in a past tense, you pronounce it helped. You just add the D sound at the end, helped. You didn't say help it, helped, simply helped. Okay, but very good, wonderful.
Okay.
Well, all of you, very good responses, wonderful. Okay, honestly. Okay, so let's move on then to another one, and the students who have gotten into the reunion recently, and those who had some troubles in order to respond the past round, they are now going to be able to respond. Okay, so please, every single one of us, try to listen to the lecture. Oh, sorry, and please try to take your notes as well so that we can respond. Okay, so please let's listen to this older lecture.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a sociology class.
Let's consider the way sociologists use the terms culture and society. A society is a distinct group of people. A sociologist would say that people in a society are defined by their social interactions and the culture they share. Meanwhile, culture itself can be defined as that society's shared knowledge, beliefs, and expectations. Often people think of a society as something really, big. And sure, that's true. An entire nation, for example, will generally have some common thread of culture that defines it. The most obvious example is that citizens of one region generally speak a common language. But think about behavioral standards too. Like, what's considered polite or impolite? Whereas in one country you might be expected to take off your shoes as the guest in another's home. In other countries that might be considered strange. Cultural traits like that can extend over enormous populations. But a society can also be much smaller, much simpler. Take this class. Aren't we a society? We have social interactions with each other every week. And I think it's fair to say we have a culture of a sort too. Think back to what happened on the second day of class. Do you all remember? I'd missed my train and didn't have any way to let you all know that I'd be late. But in contrast to other classes, where students might have just headed home 15 minutes after the planned start time, each and every one of you waited the full 30 minutes it took me to arrive. That kind of set expectations, right? It laid the foundation for a culture of patience, something I think is still true of this particular group, this little society.
Using points and examples from the lecture, explain how a society can be a large group of people or a very small group.
Okay. So that is the lecture. Okay, in this case, the first student to respond is going to be Jadi. So please, every single one of you begin to prepare your responses now. Okay, that's it. So please, Jadi, have your microphone ready and please begin to deliver your response now.
In this lecture, we have presented the fascinating topic about society and culture. Society is a group of people that have different social interactions, and they share culture. Culture can be knowledge that could be shared between people, and they can share some expectations and beliefs. In order to be large or small, a society could be large when the citizens can share their own language and the things that are polite or impolite. For example, take off the shoes could be polite in one place or impolite in other place. And the society could be small too, for example, in a class environment, because they share social interaction and they have a culture to assume to share.
Perfect response, Jadi. Thank you very much. Wonderful. So please now let's go to Claudia. Are you able to respond now?
Okay.
Wonderful.
Okay. I start?
No, yeah, wait a minute. So we are going to begin the timer. Okay, so please begin to deliver your response now.
In this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of culture and society. We've been told that society can be distinct type of people that have some type of interaction and that share culture, and culture is the knowledge, the beliefs that have some group of people that have in common. The professor also explains that a society can be a big group, like in a country that share the same language and the same behavior. They have the same, they share the things that they believe are good or bad. And a society can be also as small as a class. He uses the example that they have a culture of patience, since they are going to wait for him if he ever arrives late, and that they speak the same language. And well, that's all.
All right, thank you very much, Julia. Wonderful. All right, so just give me a second. Okay, so now please, Carolina, you're going to do the next one. All right, so be prepared, and please, Carolina, begin to deliver your response now. Okay, let's begin again, Carol. It's okay. Can you respond, or you are experimenting some technical issues? Carolina? Can you listen to me? Okay. Oh no. Oh, hi teacher had to go out. Okay. It's fine. Don't worry. It's fine, Karina. I just read the announcement here. It's fine. So, Miguel, please, let's go with you and have your microphone on and begin to
Me,
deliver your
teacher?
response. Yeah, Miguel.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
exactly. Thank you very much. Okay, so please begin to deliver your response now.
Okay, in this lecture, we've been presented to the incredible topic of culture and society. A sociologist says that a society is a group of people who share culture, and culture means that it's a group, a society where the members share beliefs and habits. But others think it's bigger than that, and they say that it's a group of citizens, like sharing common language, for example. But here there's a problem because there are rules that not everyone follows, which are cultural traits. So that makes someone believe that society is something simple, like a class, where there are things that there's a group of people who follows something. It doesn't even that doesn't matter the amount of people, but it means what they do in common. That's all.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Miguel. Okay. So now please, Alvaro, please turn your microphone on and please begin to deliver your response now.
Okay, in this lecture, we've been presented the fascinating topic of the society and culture. The society is a group of people that share a culture, like one language or the same habits. Therefore, it's a group of people that follow some person. And the professor questions about if we are a society and talk about the differences in the society and talk about the culture of patients. And that is all, teacher. I don't remember more.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alvaro. It's okay. Wonderful. Okay. So the next one is going to be Carlos. Carlos, please have your microphone ready and begin to deliver your response now.
In this lecture, we've been presented to the incredible topic of culture and society. The professor states that culture is defined by the action of sharing knowledges and beliefs, and society defined by the way that people behave or the social interactions. And also it states examples of big cities of society that can be a small and large. A small society can be a class, and where they need to follow some certain rules. For example, when the teacher couldn't arrive to the class on time, and because he lost the train and couldn't send a message, that's and that they cannot start with the class because the teacher was in the class. And also they can exist large society, for example, the country where people speak a common language. And there are some things that are that are polite and impolite. For example, the action of taking out your shirt when you're at home.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Carlos. Perfect. Okay, Laura, you're going to be the next one, please.
Yes.
Wonderful. So please begin to respond to the question now.
Okay. In this topic, we're involved in the fascinating topic of what is society, and this is a distinct group of people, especially those people that share like rules and language, even culture. However, there are different types of a society, as like big society or small. A big society can have can be at some new characteristics like a culture and new and rules that can be polite or impolite for the group of people. And a small society is as small as a class that can have rules too. That's all.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Laura. Okay. And finally, Marines, please, it's going to be your time So have your camera and, well, excuse me, your microphone on, your camera if you can, and please begin to deliver your response now.
In this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of the sociological definition of culture and society. Culture is defined as the shared knowledge that certain group of people share, and society could be defined as their social interactions. There could be many societies inside of a culture. Culture is a very large, big group, such as a country. For example, a practice in a country like taking off your shoes could be not or could not be shared in other countries. This is a cultural practice. Besides, a society could be smaller, like for example, a class or a group of class. In this class, they could share some rules and norms from his teacher.
Right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Marinas. Okay, so that's it. That's everyone. Okay, now some very, very small but meaningful commentaries. For example, Jadi, wonderful, like perfect response. Very, very good. Okay, continue like that. You're doing a very good job. Okay. Claudia, exactly. It was the same with you. I mean, I think that every single one of you, it's delivering a wonderful response. With Claudia, it was just the time that she got out of time for a matter of 10 seconds. But as I say, that it's you know, you can improve that by practicing, because you're going to learn how to measure your time, right? So very good, Claudia. Miguel, exactly, perfect response, wonderful, very good. Álvaro as well, very good. For example, keep an eye on words as, for example, professor, like professor, the intonation is in professor. And for example, differences as well, certain differences between culture and between society. And but very good. And also I would recommend you try to, for example, give it a little bit more of order. What do I mean by this, Aro? For example, if you are beginning to talk about culture, talked about culture for a matter of 30 seconds, I don't know, 20 seconds, and then move on to society, right? Because if you, for example, talked about a very small information about culture, and then you move on and throw out another super small information about society, and you go like interchanging this information like that with a very, very tiny amount of information for every single topic, the response, at least to me, it feels a little bit more unorganized, because like, is given that you're not respecting the specific order, not the specific order, but you're not finishing to talk about a specific topic, and you mention more and more topics, like as I say, you don't finish to talk about this, and you begin to talk about the other thing. Maybe it's a little bit difficult to follow. I mean, I'm not saying that it's bad, but I would recommend you, as I say, try to speak about one topic. For example, in this case, culture, finish whatever the professor talked about culture, and then move on to society, right? Because that way it's way easier to understand you and to follow your reasoning train, right? So rather than using that approach of throwing out informations, varying the order of the topic. But very good anyways. Carlos, very good too. For example, Carlos followed other order. He began by talking about society when, for example, in the actual lecture, the professor began by talking about culture, but nevertheless, it was good because he began talking about society. He talked about society and he finished talking about society, and then he moved on to culture. And it was very good because it was very easy to follow him in his reasoning train. Okay, so the order is not that much important. But if you're going to talk about something, try to follow that idea until the end, until you finish to pronounce every single piece of information you have about that topic, and then you move on to the other one, as Carlos did, obviously with older, but it was very good. Anyways, I was completely able to understand him, and it was perfect. Very good, Carlos. Lara as well, perfect response, wonderful. And Marina's too. I think you are all having a wonderful level, and I'm very, very glad and proud of it. Okay, so very, very good. Congratulations to every single one of you. Okay, now let's move on then to another one. We have a lot of material to practice. Okay, let's go to another lecture. Okay, next. please listen to this older lecture.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a physical science class.
So, in the early 20th century, there was this big debate going on in the scientific community. Did very small stuff like electrons behave like particles? Or did electrons, these negatively charged things that whirled around the nucleus of the atom, did these electrons actually behave like something else? Well, for a long time, it was assumed that because electrons were discrete, because electrons seemed to be individual objects with specific energy levels, for a long time it was assumed that electrons were simply small particles. But then, the double-slit experiment happened. In the double-slit experiment, electrons are shot at a screen containing two long vertical holes. The positions of the electrons after they go through the screen are captured on film. Now, experimenters expected that the results of the experiment would be simple, because, well, they thought that electrons were like small particles. They guessed that the electrons that went through the two slits would create a pattern of two narrow bands, or lines, on the film. However, this is not at all what the experimenters saw. Instead, they were shocked that the electrons formed an interference pattern, one by one, on the film. Now, in other words, the electrons randomly scattered all over the film in a wave-like pattern, instead of collecting in two narrow bands and creating the pattern that particles would make. So, the double-slit experiment was significant because it forced scientists to rethink the nature of electrons. They realized that electrons, like light, have characteristics of both particles and waves. Like particles, they collected one by one on the film. But like waves, they formed a complex interference pattern on the film, instead of forming two neat lines. And the results of the experiment? Well, they're discussed, debated, and reproduced to this day.
Using points and examples from the talk, describe the double-slit experiment and explain why the professor thinks that it is significant.
Okay, very scientific lecture. I want to listen to your responses on this specific subject. Okay, so the first student to respond in this case is going to be Marines in this case. So please be ready, Marines. But nevertheless, all of you begin to prepare your response now. Right hands up. Please, Marines, have your microphone on and begin to deliver your response now.
In this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of physical science, talking about the electrons. In the past centuries, there was a debate from what do they believe, how the electrons behave. They used to believe that the electrons behave like small particles. But when they started experimenting, they realized that these electrons not just behave like small particles, but just they behave in an interference patterns. This means that these electrons are different from all the other small particles. So they made these scientists rethink about their nature, because in this experiment, they form two bands, like waves, not like small particles.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Marines. Okay, so the next one is going to be Laura. Please, Laura, could you turn on your microphone? And please begin to deliver your response now.
Okay. In the past, we've been involved in the fascinating topic of the electrons and its behaviors for the 20th centuries. By the centuries, many scientific have something in common, that was that electrons were like particles that behave just alone, and also about nucleons of this atom years later. Then by those investigations, they were concluded that those electrons behave as a wave, and that's all the theory.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Laura. Okay, so Carlos, you want to be the third one? Please turn on your microphone and now begin to deliver your response now.
In this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of a physical science class talking about the electrons. The professor were saying that a long time ago there was a debate about the electrons. I'm wondering about how was the electrons behave, and that results into particles. They are very individual and small, a simple form, and just particles. But then the professors started making an experiment where they realized that these electrons weren't behaving like that. Instead, they were creating a pattern with a very interseries form between the patterns, and this made to the professor rethink about the natural form of the electrons.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Carlos. Okay, now let's move on. Please, Miguel, you're going to be the next one. Have your microphone ready, and please begin to respond now.
Okay, in this lecture, we've been involved into the fascinating topic of physics of electrons. And there was a debate about electrons, and they were saying that they behave like something else, not like some individual and small particles. And due to that, they made an experiment called the double slide, which consists about throwing electrons through a hole in order to look at a pattern. And they realized that there were two results where they behaved like particles, and they formed two lines on the film. And there was another where they formed a complex interfered pattern, which made them to conclude that electrons work like light particles, which are like particles and also waves. That's all.
Very good, Miguel. Thank you very much. Okay, so Alvaro, you're going to be the next one. Please have your microphone ready and begin to deliver your response now.
Okay, in this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of physical science. The professor mentioned that for a long time the electrons were considered simple parts with a simple behavior. They analyzed the behavior of the electrons, and they did an experiment. In the experiment, each electron is different, and it doesn't behave like a simple particle. Therefore, one important result is that electrons have a different kind of patterns, and that is all, teacher.
Right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Alvaro. Okay, wonderful. So, Jadi, please, you're going to continue. Have your microphone ready, and please begin to respond now.
In this lecture, we have been presented to the topic about science related to electrons. In the 20th century, it was a debate about the electrons. Scientists thought that there were particles that behave something else. They thought that electrons were individual objects with energy levels, and they assumed that there were simple particles. But then they developed an experiment where they discovered that electrons were scattered to mirror bands, and they form interference patterns. So this experiment was important because it shows that electrons were both particles, were composed of both particles and waves, and they form complex forms. And this debate is displayed until those days.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Yadi. Okay. Please, Claudia, you're going to be the next one. Turn on your microphone and please begin to respond now.
In this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of the nature of electrons. A long time ago, electrons were considered like small particles, and they believed they behave like that. But later they made an experiment. They shoot electrons at the screen and film them. And they saw that electrons actually behave like two things. They have two natures, like a nature that reacts like a particle and a nature that behaves like a wave, since in the experiment they saw that they form a pattern in the film.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Julia. Okay, and I think Carolina is not able to respond, right? So it's okay. Wonderful. So I actually don't have any observation. I mean, as I say, every single one of you students is exposing a level that is very good. So if you perform like this in your exam on the actual day, I assure you that you're going to have at least something above 25. Okay, so continue like this. You're doing pretty well. And as I say, maybe, for example, for Alvaro, the only thing would be just try to expand a little bit more, right? Because you always cut down your response when you are having 10 remaining seconds. But it's okay. I mean, if you believe that you don't really have anything else to say, it's fine. But if you were able to complement a little bit more, it will be even more fantastic. Okay, but it's up to you. But wonderful. As I say, no objections, no commentaries. Your level is fantastic. It's illustrious. Okay, I like that word. Okay, let's go to the final one, and please listen with me.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a literature class.
In the 8th century BC, a legendary author named Homer wrote two epic poems. You probably know them already, the Iliad and the Odyssey. They're fascinating poems, really, partly because they give us such a clear window to the culture of the time. But what culture or what period of Greek history was Homer describing? His own era or an earlier one? It's an interesting question, but it's very likely there's no real answer. You see, Homer was working in the oral tradition. Before he wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey down, poems were told and retold by generations of storytellers. Each generation added details to the poems, so it's likely that these poems are actually this. They're an interesting mixture of historical details about a bunch of different time periods. So let me give you a couple of examples. Here's one. Homer describes helmets made out of boar tusks. Well, just these kinds of helmets have actually been discovered in sites dating back to the 2nd millennium BCE in Greece. They weren't used in later time periods. That's a pretty clear indication, right? So clearly Homer's poems preserved some authentic details about the distant past, and some would argue that's the era Homer intended to write about. But then we take a look at another detail and it's a bit more nebulous. Homer describes chariots, horse-drawn wagons carrying warriors into battle. He describes them as simply carrying troops on and off the battlefield. That might be how chariots were used in Homer's time, sure, but in earlier history, the time when those helmets might have been used, say, they were used in battles themselves. The chariots, that is. So this is a good example of Homer adding details from his own world into the poems.
Using points and examples from the talk, explain why the professor thinks there is no real answer to the question of what period of history Homer described.
Okay, wonderful. So please, now the student that is going to begin, it's going to be Carlos. So please, Carlos, be ready. No, actually, somebody who has not begun. Miguel Angel, I think you have not. No, Alvaro, you're going to be the first one, okay? Alvaro, so please, but every single one of you, please begin to prepare your response now. All right, time's up. Please, Alvaro, have your microphone on and begin to respond now.
Okay, in this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of the period of history, and the professor is talking about the culture of the time, that there are many interesting questions without answers. They talk about the historic dates that doesn't have much arguments and details, and give some examples like the chariot and in the period of the war. That is all, teacher. I can't talk more.
Okay, it's fine, Alvaro, it's fine. Are you taking notes, by the way, or maybe you are in other place, you're not able to take notes?
Yes, I am taking notes, but my internet connection is not good and I can't hear much.
Okay, wonderful. Don't worry, Albert. I fully understand you. Okay, but very good response. Anyways, without a good internet, you respond very well. Okay, thank you. Okay, so next one is going to be Carlos. Please, you're going to be the second. Begin to prepare your response now.
This lecture will be presented to the fascinating topic of literatures, talking about poems and Homer specifically. Homer is a very writer that writes about storytellers, but with details. And the professor is stating two examples: the Hammer and the Cherries. The Hammer is it's a very authentic, authentic. I don't know. And the other one is the Cherries. This was used in the battle themselves, in the battlefield, in the period of the war. That's it. That's all, teacher.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Carlos. Okay, it's fine. Jadi, please continue. Have your microphone ready and please deliver your response now.
In this lecture, we have been presenting the topic that passed on the 18th century about the Homer poems, for example, the Iliad. The poems that Homer described shows the culture of the time. But what is the culture of the period that he was describing? This period is it's not clear. They don't have a real answer because Homer was writing some oral traditions. At the beginning, the poems were transmitted by storytellers, and there were a mixture of some details. And then Homer in the second millennium presented tales of past of intendants. The tales were added into their poems, for example, the battlefield of what so that's why they do not have the exactly period that Homer was describing.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Jadi. Okay, so please, Claudia, now it's your turn. Have your microphone ready and begin to respond now.
In this lecture, we've been presented to the fascinating topic of Homer's poems, the Iliad and Odyssey. The professor talks about how these both poems were wrote for a long time ago, and he wonders whether these poems were inspired by Homer's own era or later years. So he said that at the beginning, these poems were an oral tradition. So maybe many of the persons that tell these poems made some additions to the history. He mentions two things: the helmets that were described in Homer's poems that were developed later, like in 21st century. And also he mentions the chariots that were actually developed in the same year that Homer wrote these poems.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much, Claudia. Very good response. Okay, so Miguel, please, you follow? Oh no, you started, right? Okay, fine. Oh no, you didn't, right? So Miguel, it's your turn. Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
So please begin to respond now.
Okay, in this lecture, we've been involved in the fascinating topic of Homer poems. Like he made the most incredible ones, which are the Iliad and the Odyssey. And there was a question, which era was represented in each one of these? And there's not a current answer because there's not only one era. There's a mix of many time periods he represented on his poems, and he showed other periods with the details he showed on there when he wrote them. An example could be the helmets that weren't invented yet. Looking at the timeline of the history, and there are other things that he put that were of his timeline period in order to. Well, that's all, teacher.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Miguel, okay. Please, okay, the next one is going to be Laura, please, Laura. Have your microphone ready and begin to respond now.
Okay, in this section, we have been immersed in the fascinating topic of the period of when those books have grown like Iliad and Odyssey, and those history he said that are like a mystery because it's not the era they write is there's not an answer for this culture, and I'm sorry, teacher, I didn't take notes.
Oh, okay, it's fine, Laura. It's fine. Okay, thank you very much. Anyways, no, it's okay. Anyways, it's okay. Anyway, thank you very much. Okay, so finally, Marinas, please begin to deliver your response now.
In this lecture, we've been presented the fascinating topic of literature, specifically talking about Homer's work. What the professor talks about his 2 poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, but the debate emerges when they are trying to describe whether he's talking about his era or a previous one. So they started speculating that in the previous years, a lot of people used to take these poems and add some details in order to express whether they were living in the era. So they kind of change the poems throughout the time. So the details were changing through, but in some works of Homer, you can see that some details have been preserved. Like now.
Oh, it's okay, Marinas. Thank you very much for your response. Okay, nobody's lacking, right? Okay, I think nobody's lacking. Okay, so wonderful. It was very good. I mean, this lecture was a little bit confusing. Yes, I have to admit, because the professor was not the best, let's say. Okay, but very good. I think that every single one of you approached it very well. You follow the structure. You mentioned the example of Homer's poems, the Iliad, the Odyssey. Wonderful. Okay, I think that you definitely catch the important idea here. Okay, so as you know, before we finish the class, we're going to take the traditional poll, and I'm going to also. Oh no, wait. There's another one here. Okay, please respond to this anonymous poll as you consider it to be correct. And now I'm going to take your assistant, so please don't go. I'm going to call your name, and then you have to say present. Okay, just give me a second. All right. Wonderful. Just give me a second here. Okay, so please. It said here, Maria Fernanda Rivero. No. Caballero Lopez, Carlos.
No, teacher, here.
Thank you very much. Marines, Genesis.
Here, teacher.
Thank you very much. What about Conicilla Carolina. I know she's here. It's okay. Thank you very much, Carolina. I'm covering you. Jandira Lisette.
Present.
Thank you very much. Yadi, wonderful. Okay, what about Bonnie Taira Ugarte? Okay, Bonnie is not here. Okay, it's fine. It's fine, it's fine. I wasn't present yesterday. Okay, wonderful. Okay, yeah, I understand. Don't worry, it's fine. Just want to stop this. Okay, so wonderful.
Teacher,
No.
you didn't call my name.
Yes, yes. No, I have not finished. Don't worry. This is okay. So there is another poll here that you have to fill. You know, on Wednesday you have to fill 2 polls. So I'm sorry for it. I know it's annoying, but please fill the other one. Okay, until I continue calling you. 47. Okay, I think this is the one. Okay, wonderful. So now please, is it here? Claudia Cecilia Velasquez? No. Okay, no, this is another one. What about okay, here, Cárdenas, Guzmán Claudia, Patricia?
Yes, that's me.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Now, Laura Leticia, Choque Mamani, I saw you there. Thank you very much. Alvaro,
Present
Chayapa.
here, teacher present.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Alvaro. What about Gutierrez Jessica? Okay, she's not come. And Miguel Angel Plata. So you there too.
Present, yes, teacher.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so that's all. Thank you very much to your students for your responses and for everything. Okay, so thank you very much, and please see you tomorrow so that we can continue with the writing section. We're going to be in a new section, so it's going to be a very exciting class. Okay, Carlos, you have a final question, please?
Yes, teacher. I'm seeing the screen that the poll wasn't really the real poll. We were seeing the results.
Oh wow, super weird. Now it's
Yeah.
Are you able to?
No, it's still.
Weird.
I'm just seeing the results of the poll.
Oh, weird. Okay, it's fine. I think it's fine. I mean it's funny because I cannot see the results, but thank you very much. Okay, it's okay, Carlos. Don't worry. So as I was saying, see you tomorrow, and thank you very much for your presence. Okay.
Thank you.